Enzo D'Armenio and I are very pleased to welcome you all to our international symposium on augmented images. We'd like to thank the speakers who accepted our invitation, as well as the public who has come to participate. I'm very happy to welcome the president of recently elected president of our university, Professor Anne-Sophie Nyssen, who is honoring us with her presence at the opening of this meeting. She's a psychologist and she has worked as well on image analysis, especially on eye tracking. I give her the floor for the opening address of the event, and I thank her very, very much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to welcome you to the University of Liège. I don't know if you know, the university is a big university with 4 campuses, so you are in one campus, and we are a full university. That means that we cover all the disciplines. And I'm very happy to open this symposium because, as Giulia said, I've been working for 20 years now on 3D and 2D image. I know that this is a critical issue for the society, and as a psychologist, we can already see the impact of the use of augmented image on behavior. And so we need this kind of symposium to better know the whole impact of the use of augmented image on society, but also on young people. Maybe you have already experienced that, but the use of augmented image is more and more spread, not only in research, but also in training. And in the university, within the University of Liège, there are a lot of teachers who use simulators to train young people. And it is, I think, whenever we use a simulator, we have to keep a critical eye on the use of the simulator. It's not only the simulator, but it's the scenario that we build before the use of the simulator that is very important for us. So I think we will be able to maybe to talk about this kind of issues within your symposium, but I want to say welcome to the university. I won't be able to stay for your symposium, but I know that Giulia will keep me in touch with your talks, and let's work. Thank you.
You want a coffee?
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I have to go. Thank you. No, thank you. Bye-bye.
So, first of all, I'd like to tell you that I'm really delighted with this symposium, which has brought quite a lot of interesting people together. I would like to thank all invited speakers for being here, and also our friends and colleagues, Ralph de Koning and Thierry Lenin, for being here and for accompanying Enzo and me during these 2 days of symposium. I would like also to thank the researchers as well as the PhD students who are joining us here in Liège for this event. As you probably know, this symposium has its origin in 3 research projects. The one obtained by Enzo D'Armenio, the Marie Curie Individual Fellowships, entitled IMACTIS, Fostering Critical Identities Through Social Media Archival Images, from 2020 to 2022, and the 2 4-year projects I have obtained, the first one from 2018 to 2021, Big visual data, a semiotic approach to indexing and visualizing image archives. And the second one, from 22 to 2025, entitled Towards a Genealogy of Visual Forms, Semiotics and Computer-Assisted Approaches to Large Collections of Images. These two research projects have been financed by National Belgian Fund for Scientific Research. For this symposium, we decided to congregate the issues tackled by our respective research projects. The first axis concerns the analysis of large collections of fine art images through a semiotic perspective, one which obviously includes the point of view of art historians such as Warburg and Faucillon. The second and third axes concern Enzo's projects on social networks, which address the matter of socialization and immersion through technology. In this short introduction, I will briefly recall the objectives of my two projects, and I will propose a few ideas to solve some problems in current research on image processing. And then I will give the floor to Enzo. My current research project, entitled Towards a Genealogy of Visual Forms, Semiotic and Computer-Assisted Approaches to Large Image Collections, focuses on the relation between contemporary approaches in image processing and the genealogy of visual forms in art history as conceived of by Henri Warburg, notably in the Atlas Mnemosyne, and by Henri Faucillon. I refer to the life of forms in art. This project is a continuation of the previous one, Big Visual Data, a semiotic approach to indexing and visualizing image archives, which was devoted to finding different kinds of collaboration between visual semiotics, that is, qualitative analysis, and the quantitative automatic analysis of a big visual data. I started my reflection with the media visualization project by Levmanovic, in which images are organized into diagrams in a way that those that share the same features are made to be located in the same areas of the diagram, while the ones that do not are placed in other areas. The position of each image within a group of images offers a precise characterization of its formal properties pertaining to colors, spaces, shapes, and show their relation to the qualities of other groups of images. This is an important step for developing the study of corpora. Even if media visualization analyzes exclusively what we call in semiotics the plane of expression of images, that is, what is perceptible in an image, and for this reason, this kind of analysis is often violently criticized by art historians and scholars in humanities, my observation is that this kind of analysis, made by operations of division and grouping, may be used for the comparative study of the plane of content of the different groups of images. In a sense, the automatic analysis of the plane of expression can be useful for the discovery of similarities and the differences on the plane of content of images. To reach the objective of analyzing the plane of content as well, it's necessary to observe the different groups of images distributed on the surface of the visualization and to question the content characterizing these groups. If the images that belong to a group displayed in the lower left part of the visualization are considered, regarding their plane of expression, as completely different from the ones situated in the upper right part of the visualization, what about their plane of content? Do the images belonging to the same group on the plane of expression belong as well to the same genre, for instance, such as portrait, still life, landscape, and so on? If not, what is it on the plane of content that makes a group of images similar or different from other groups? Finally, the visualization can become a map displaying not places but groups of images defined by their formal features to be used to test their content. Genre, for instance. In this sense, tentative corpora can be constituted and analyzed through semiotics tools. While the problem of studying corpora of different sizes was the most important matter, I would emphasize among those raised by the project that was concluded at the end of 2021 and which led to the doctoral thesis of Cédric Omba, our cameraman today. My current project, which made it possible to recruit one postdoc, Uda Lankadam, she's here, who will give a talk this afternoon. This project focuses on the issue of image segmentation. In my view, a different kind of automatic segmentation of images is necessary, one that would make it possible to study images according to their composition dynamics and according to the forces they engage. Until today, images have been measured based on their feature averages. Features such as color saturation, for instance, or through iconographic motifs as in replica project. What do I mean proposing an image segmentation by the dynamics of forces within a still image? The forces can partly be identified with directionality. The direction of a glance, of a raised hand, of a pointing finger, but also with the directions given by components of the image which are not figurative but formal plastic. The change of the luminosity within a painting works as a kind of arrow. The change in saturation is able to produce a force of elevation or of a fall. Let's look at the painting I analyzed for other reasons, especially to demonstrate that the image has the ability to negate that which at the same time it represents. There are at least three forces at work which may be identified in Susanna and the elders of Tintoretto. First, the direction of the gazes of the elders spying on beautiful Susanna while she baths. Second, the gaze of Susanna, who shields herself from view by focusing on the mirror and on the water mirror, introspection devices in painting and in cinema, and by positioning herself between the trees and the hedge, which function as protective and closing devices. Third, the two opposing models of observing, the simulacrum of our own spectatorial gaze, is a gaze which hesitates between the view provided by the perspective upon Susanna's body, the latter being nude, illuminated and frontally exposed, and the model of gazing proposed by the elders as indiscreet onlookers who are excluded from the spectacle of a female nudity. How is one to assume a position given the multiplication of the points of observation to be fulfilled? Another example can be seen in the painting of Tintoretto, Starkey and Lucretia. This case shows the oppositions between forces of elevation, Lucretia's body is suspended and pulled upwards by Tarquin, and forces of fall. The pearls of the necklace are falling down, as are the small Venus sculpture in the right side of the painting and the pillow as well. This being said in passing, Thierry Lenain, who is coming, wrote an important paper on temporality in painting in which he analyzes this Tintoretto as an example of the extended present, a present that has a duration and then a rhythm. Regarding this painting, Uda Lankadam did some experiments on it using open pose, dense pose and detectron. But they are all unsatisfactory, especially because the bodies are not analyzed as articulated complexes, but only as skeletons, or as undistinctive masses, or as a texture. It is important to note as well that the statue is not considered as a body by the algorithm, and that these algorithms do not take the background into account, which is obviously a default. My proposition on the genealogy of forms is based on a new process of image segmentation, notably one that recognizes that the forms result from both internal dynamics of forces, internal in the sense bodily forces, and external forces, the relation between the gesture and the background. How can we teach the machine to segment images according to conflictual directions or to other kinds of dynamics present in visual forms? The strategy chosen by Impet and Moretti and by Replica Project, which are both devoted to the genealogy of motifs, has been to isolate bodies or motifs, the figures that are the background of the image. This is, in my view, a crucial error because the background participates in the system of forces and contrasting directions inside the frame and takes part in the ecological organization of every artwork. In a painting, the figure and the background are always coupled, as said by Fossillon. Represented gestures, poses, and movements are not isolated elements in the image. On the contrary, they spread, propagate, and circulate across the image's background as active forces. This idea of studying forces in painting, or the forces that make painting a totality, a wall, a composition, with the objective of making continuous bodily gestures analyzable in large collections of painting and photographs, is based on a method of image segmentation that underlies a wider philosophical reflection. This method finds its roots in the French school of semiotics, especially in the tensive semiotics developed by Jacques Fontanier and Claude Zipperberg, which studies differences not only as binary categorical oppositions, but also as graduated modulations. For instance, from upper to lower light intensity, from a right situated saturated color to a left situated unsaturated color, from a light concentration to an intensive shadow, for instance. Through the oppositions and the graduated scale located on the plane of expression of images, the analyst is able to study every image neither as an average nor as an accumulation of isolatable objects, but as a singular object made of tensions between opposing characteristics and opposing directions. This approach finds its roots as well in the philosopher Gilles Deleuze's work on pictorial diagrams. Deleuze worked, as you know, in his book Francis Bacon, The Logic of Sensation, showed in his book how painting can be constructed through forces of restrictions and diffusion, that is, dynamics of compactification or explosion, dissipation. Here the conflict between contrasting forces of deformation of the face are easily visible. Some parts of the face have been partly erased with a spatula, some others resist, and the whole face underwent various displacements. The mathematician René Thom's idea of conflicting forces in a painting is also very useful for my project. Thom considers the image to be not a set of isolatable parts, but a composition which emerges from the tension between conflicting centrifugal and centripetal forces. It's very important to emphasize that the unity of the work of art is, within a frame, ensured by the conflict between contrary forces. A Belgian art historian named Lucien Massard wrote an interesting article using the sophisticated schematization of catastrophe in René Thom's mathematical theory to emphasize movements, gestures, and forces in painting. These are the schematization of catastrophe he applied to the paintings. And even Aby Warburg, in his panels of images published in the Atlas Mnemosyne, the first effort to visualize images on the basis of their similarity in terms of forms and of inherent dynamics, and the first attempt to understand the influence of images on images, considers that images work as dynamograms, which are forms having recorded a dynamic force from other images. While digital art history currently looks for similarities and repetitions of motifs within collections of images, what Warburg was looking for during his times was the survival of forces, not motives. Namely, types of energies condensed in images of the past that would otherwise have been polarized in more recent images. The idea of the genealogy of forces in images was already present in 1920, and I hope that computer vision researchers will be available to take this a step further in order to better understand the functioning of fine art images and of their genealogy. Thanks for your attention.
Enzo, c'est l'icône bleue, full screen. L'icône bleue, full screen. Là. La deuxième icône.
C'est bon. C'est bon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm also very happy about this symposium, and I would like to thank all the guests for accepting to participate and for being here with us at the University of Liège. I would also like to seize this opportunity to confess that this is the first major symposium I have organized, and that I will never be able to do it alone. For this reason, I would like to publicly thank Maria Giulia. This symposium for me is not only an opportunity for scientific growth, but also for growth in terms of organizational skills. During my talk, as already anticipated by Maria Giulia, I will briefly present the two remaining research axes at the basis of this symposium. Firstly, the socializing identity feature of images, and secondly, the immersive qualities gained through virtual and augmented reality technologies. I will do this by referring to two projects, one that I completed in March and one that I just started. As far as identity and socializing feature are concerned, my Marie Curie project, IMACTIS Fostering Critical Identities for Social Media Archival Images, aim to analyze identity-related images on social networks, so YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, Facebook, and to propose a set of critical strategies for citizens and other social actors for building identity narrations. This project had a twofold objective. On the one hand, I tried to understand the mechanism through which value, that is, social, aesthetic, and monetary values, are constructed on social networks. The second objective of the project was to analyze the repercussion of this new value economy on the identity expressed and socialized through images. The main theoretical hypothesis was based on a reinterpretation of Paul Ricoeur's theory of identity. In his now classic book, Oneself as Another, Ricoeur conceives of identity as a dynamic core composed of two interrelated polarities. On the one hand, there is the identity item, which includes distinctive disposition, character traits, the body understood in its physical dynamism, and habits. Overall, the identity item is composed of the set of traits that allow us to recognize a person as the same, and which, in a certain sense, incorporate here or there invariable and static core. On the other hand, the identity ipse pertains to the behavioral identity, the ethical values chosen to build a lasting conduct, the heroic figures underlying one's own transformation, and the innovative habits adopted to reprogram it. It is the narrative intelligence of a story that allows to fill the interval of meaning that separates these two polarities. Ricoeur identifies the construction of identity as a critical appropriation of the model of verbal storytelling, particularly those of literature. It is precisely thanks to a critical appropriation of the literary model of narration that it is possible to apply fabulation to life and to give identity a durable, meaningful, and flexible form. This theoretical model allows us to identify the tension to which identity is exposed on social networks. On the one hand, identities confront with renewed experiential pressure. The strong presence of simple images which limit itself to showing the presence of an individual on different occasions, think of selfies, which are poorly articulated at a discursive level, are a clear example of this experiential pressure. Even the acts of liking, following, and sharing, which are at the basis of the constitution of collectives, reveal a sphere of a basic semiotic interaction close to our character dispositions. For these reasons, it is possible to situate this experiential regression as pertaining to the sphere of identity then. On the other hand, the way in which our behavior is analyzed and modeled by algorithms pertains to the sphere of the identity itself. We can think of the way in which Facebook recommends friends and content to us on the basis of our current circle of acquaintances, of the way in which Netflix recommends personalized viewing schedules based on what we have previously watched and enjoyed, and even of the way Tinder and Grindr recommend sexual and romantic partners on the basis of the face and profiles we have liked. This system of behavior modeling can be understood as entailing a risk of progressive delegation of the identity set to an algorithmic intelligence. In order to manage these two pressures, experiential and algorithmic, it is necessary to build, as Ricorre stated, an identity narration that can critically articulate them. The fundamental difference, however, lies in the model of appropriation required to achieve this process. It is no longer a question of literary models, but of models capable of physically displaying identities in relation to experiential and algorithmic pressure. In other words, we need to address models belonging to the languages of images, starting with the forms of the portrait up to other practice capable of visually structuring a narration. Influencers in particular negotiate this dual pressure according to a competitive regime, as noted by Lev Manovich in his book Instagram and Contemporary Images. They construct narration through their identity-related images with the aim of attracting as many views, like, and follows as possible. Starting from this core hypothesis, I analyze a new genre of images that do not have a specific focus on a social theme or domain, but on the contrary are characterized by their identity-related qualities. This is the case of face reveals, reaction videos, and children's game channels on YouTube. These cases show us the peculiar way in which images increasingly tends to adhere to an identity close to genuine, instinctive, and contagious reactions. I've also proposed an analysis of the Instagram profile of Rupi Kaur, a Canadian poet and influencer of Indian origin, from the beginning of her activities until today. I was able to identify the change in style from a casual use of identity-related images to a competitive, planned, and effective exploitation of her images. In this analysis, I found a wide variety of deformations of the portrait genre, some of which may be seen in contemporary pictorial and photographic art, including turning one's back to the camera, the use of veils, and atmospheric occlusion, but also fragmented portraits, which are typical of such a network as noted by Lev Manovich. More generally, this symposium seems to me a good opportunity to reflect on the relationship between two expressive systems, the semiotic qualities of the face and the semiotic qualities of images. Like faces, images do not predicate, but rather compose. Certainly, we can immediately identify a similar syntax in the construction of meaning by faces and images. For example, the fact that they do not simulate linear, but rather tabular readings. It seems to me that the relationship between the compositional qualities of images and the compositional qualities of the face has been somewhat liberated and extended thanks to digital manipulation software. On the one hand, there are quantities of softwares that make it possible to prefigure aesthetic modification. This is the case of software that aim to visualize the result of surgery or sex changes, as studies, for instance, by Bruno Surace, a member of DRC Facets project led by Massimo Leone. On the other hand, the link between images and the face is particularly evident in the action of face recognition software used, for instance, by the police for public order issues. But it's also the case with the phenomenon of deepfakes, where trained algorithms are able to substitute one face for another within video images. In other words, it seems to me that the relationship between the face, images, and algorithms configures an unprecedented space of social imagination in which the compositional qualities of the face and of visual language become an experiential terrain for visual thinking. The third and final axis of the symposium concerns the immersive qualities of images, particularly virtual and augmented reality images, but also the mainstream production of the video game industry, which are the focus of my current research project, Kinetimages, Interactive Media as Kinetic Images, a genealogy of visual media based on the concept of movement. The study of this media is still determined by the concepts of interaction and immersion. However, the scientific literature does not clearly distinguish the interaction specific to this new media from the interpretive interaction specific to traditional media. Similarly, the concept of immersion postulates an unproven correlation between the spectator's sensory involvement and his or her cognitive and narrative involvement. With Kinetic Image, on the contrary, my aim is to renew the study of these media and analyze them through the concept of movement. If Lessing had clearly distinguished the art of space, sculpture, and painting from the arts of time, poetry, and music, cinema had already put this dichotomy into question. Gilles Deleuze proposed the concept of image movement to explain the deep interrelation between visual qualities and qualities of movement from the understanding of cinematographic images. More recently, Andrea Pinotti has elaborated the notion of environment image in order to underline the inhabitable and explorable character of interactive media. My proposal starts from the fact that the specificity of virtual experiences is based on the necessity on the part of the spectator to perform movements on the interface in order to accomplish movement in the virtual space. For this reason, I propose to reverse Deleuze's formula with the concept of movement image, expressive system articulated according to two intersecting syntaxes, a visual and a kinetic syntax. In the Assassin's Creed saga, for instance, the figurative space and audiovisual narration follow the norms of the historical conspiracy genre, visual syntax. But the kinetic system set up an acrobatic exploration close to parkour, requiring vertiginous pursuits and the climbing of monuments, kinetic syntax. These two syntaxes can be built in opposition or generating conflict between what the spectator must do and what he or she wants to do. On the contrary, virtual reality increases the viewer's sense of immersion through the exclusion of the real world, hidden by the virtual helmet, and the partial correspondence between movements on the physical interface and perceptual and pragmatic ones. By moving the head, the viewer can modify the point of view and act almost directly with his or her body in the digital world. Here is an example, Carne y Arena by Alejandro González Inarritu, a case already analyzed by Andrea Pinotti, which configures an opposition between the spectator's immersion and the impossibility of carrying out meaningful action. In order to reproduce the feeling of Mexican migrants in the desert, Carne y Arena sets up an experience of impotency. The spectator assumes the role of an anonymous and ignored character walking in a daze jostled by armed policemen. Before concluding, I would like to focus on a further axis of research. Much emphasis has been placed upon the multiple form of immersion and embodiment during a virtual reality session. However, the role of the opposite mechanism has perhaps been underestimated. I'm talking about all those moments in which the spectator departs from a simple incorporation or immersion to build a reflexive cognitive activity. In this context, it seems to me that three questions remain open. First, an interrogation of the imaginative mechanism that mediate between the embedded action and the interpretative distancing realized by the spectator. Sofia Pirandello's talk openly thematizes the role of imagination, and I'm sure it will provide grounds for further reflection. Second, the analysis of the effect of subjectivity that result from the embodied activity of manipulating objects and spaces through virtual movement. I'm sure that Claudio Paolucci, in his talk devoted to virtual prostheses, will approach this issue more carefully. More generally, the analysis of virtual reality and video game experiences open for deeper reflection regarding the transformation of the spectator identity during virtual session. A more structured investigation of this topic will probably be provided by Stefan Gunzel in his talk, which thematized the idea of an augmented identity. I will end this introduction here. Thank you for your attention.